Usha, I found your selfies so entertaining. I gotta try that too. But do you think these AI models are just going to make it worse because they can even go skinnier than size 00? So I'm looking forward to what all of you will say, and thanks again for a great presentation.
What I understood from your question is AI models a social solution to whatever is currently happening. And in order to answer that, I have three separate things. So the first thing is the current state of AI, what it's trying to showcase. And I want to tell it from an Indian context, not because posthuman femininity and the algorithmic aesthetics of Instagram. This is based on a very broad idea, but at the risk of generalization, I'd like to just go over the different lenses through which we can see this topic. So, this is the overall presentation. I'll try to give you the context of what I'm trying to say. So, essentially, what this study is trying to argue is that Instagram creates a form of post-human femininity. So, here, what I mean by that is essentially, if you look at any post human theory, it argues that humanity is extended by digital or artificial technology. So, what Instagram essentially is doing to a post human femininity is it is creating these ideals that are sort of demanding performance from women or men in large, people who are performing on Instagram, so whatever they display on Instagram. And it is creating a layer between the human and the digital. So, if you look at Instagram photographs, how they are edited, how the faces are shaped, we come to a new territory of human where reality is being replaced by an ideal version of reality. The thesis establishes that Instagram is a global stage of self representation. Currently, almost 40% of India is on Instagram, and if you look at the global numbers, all these social media apps, the big ones, have crossed users that are more than 1 billion. So, right now, we are at an age where online is no longer a tertiary or a secondary place. It is onto itself a world of its own, and people have their own self representations on Instagram. Essentially, if I had to boil down my research problem, it tries to understand how algorithms influence what is subjected to be a person's identity. At the same time, it also questions how colonial control can also be a part of social media. And these are the objectives. First, I want to analyze how femininity is represented in digital spaces. Second, I want to explore post human femininity as it evolves on Instagram. The idea of a woman, the idea of any identity, how it evolves because of the influx of AI and the post human body that is online. And it also looks at how feminist media is working and how these things have broader influences in critical theory. These are the theoretical frameworks. I'll quickly brush through all the theoretical frameworks. First, we have the idea of post-humanism, wherein the idea is that human experience with technology, especially in digital femininity, fundamentally changes what it means to be a human. Then, of course, the idea of the cyborg theory, cyborg manifesto, Donna Haraway. And what she says is the traditional boundary between human and machine is slowly decreasing. And what she means by machines perhaps today is in a different line, because a filter is not actually a physical thing, but at the same time it works as a machine, it works as part of our own identity. I also want to look at the beauty myth by Naomi Wolf. There is a cultural angle to this where female bodies are controlled through media and social norms, hyper reality. So how far from reality is the Instagram body, how simulations they replace reality, and how far away we are from reality and what becomes the norm. There are two other terms that I'd like to discuss. First thing is algorithmic cultures, and then the idea of digital aesthetic labor. What we choose to see, what we choose to engage with is influenced largely by AI intervention. So it's not curated by humans, it is curated by AI. So algorithm plays a very important role in how we have our own echo chambers, how we have our own experience online, especially Instagram, and how that also translates to shaping of a culture. For example, India is a test case scenario. The soft power of America or the Western countries. It is largely not taken forward by American media or global media, but it's taken forward by Instagram. So we have the rise of a new Indian generation that speaks in the lingo of American youth. How algorithmic culture carries culture and it also works as a form of colonial discourse is one of the questions within my study. At the risk of generalizing, go to points like how control and regulation works, how empowerment could be done within digital spaces. Of course, there is always two sides of the coin. There's a great resurgence of pride rallies within institutes of India. Largely, it comes down to the institute taking Instagram seriously, the institute taking public relations seriously on social media, and the norms of social media, the woke movement, they've seeped from Instagram onto actual institutions within the country, whether it is political or educational or any other domain. Aesthetic labor, when we look at from a neoliberalist or a Marxist point of view, the beauty myth or the idea of the Instagram body is also a very powerful source of economics. Take beauty care products or the ideals of beauty, icons of beauty, and the billions of dollars of industry that's happening. So if you can look at the image, this was a company called SKKN by Kim Kardashian. And within a very short period of time, it ballooned into $1 billion enterprise. And largely that can be attributed to the Instagram body, the understanding of Instagram ideals of beauty, and the influence of Western, largely European influences. The idea of beauty within the world. Now we are forming essentially a global domain of understanding where cultural specific ideals are being globalized. The idea of having a fair skin. It has been a colonial problem since pre-independence times within India, where people who are fair skin are considered to be superior to people who are largely tanned. And this continues within Instagram, because if you look at a lot of filters or how young women online would like to represent themselves, there is a very large tendency towards artificially trying to make themselves fair, or maybe thinning their nose, thinning their jawline. If we look at the post-colonial ideology, we get to theorists like Frantz Fanon, who famously wrote Black Skin. He speaks about the desire for whiteness or fairness. And also Homi Bhabha, who is a very famous post-colonial critic, who talks about how the third world countries try to copy Eurocentric beauty for global approval or within the communities that are being affected. And one of the ways in which I can prove my point is to have an actual visual analysis of how these filters, this algorithmic codes, can fundamentally change the perception of beauty. But in order to do that, one of the things that we have to do is to have a case study, to look at how a person would look when compared to a normal picture to that of an Instagram filter. Now, in order to do this, I cannot ask somebody who's an influencer for consent, because it becomes a very complicated issue. So I've made myself as an example just to show you. So if you don't mind, I'd like to show some picture comparisons of myself before and after filters to just bring home my point. So this is a normal picture taken from two phones, the iPhone and the Android. And right at the beginning, you see that even though there's a lot of work that is done with the color of my skin, the Android is tending to make it less saturated. The iPhone had an update recently that calculates and measures for people with brown skin. Well, this Android is made largely for a typical white person. So if you look at the representation of my skin, the iPhone is much more authentic. So even in the default camera, there is a lot of color science that is happening that is geared towards a particular type of user. And I picked a couple of interesting filters that are being used across the world. So take, for example, this is an iPhone filter within Instagram, which was used over 42.7 million times. And if you see how it is representing my skin, it smoothens everything. It makes the image almost not legible, but at the same time, it is trying to create a sense of false personality. Take, for example, this filter, which is over 117 million users, and it tries to artificially make my lips red. It tries to boost up colors, tries to create a sense of beauty that is not me. And if you think of it, it is largely centered around the Caucasian standard of beauty. This one from Snapchat, which has 11 billion users, who've used this. There are not 11 billion people in the world, but this has been used 11 billion times. And if you see it, it thins my jaw. It creates a version of me that is not me. Or take, for example, one of the most widely used filters on Snapchat. And if you see the way the filter changes everything about me, it is used over 39 billion times. Just to give you a context, this is the population of the Earth, 8.4 billion. It is 3 to 4 times more than the population of the Earth. And the entire population of the Earth is not already on Instagram. So you can definitely be assured that millions of people are using these filters to take pictures of themselves at least hundreds of times a year. And their perception of their own individual beauty is largely being changed by these filters. So when they look at themselves, they're no longer looking at a mirror that is an accurate representation, but they're looking at a version of themselves that is largely altered by AI. And the most interesting part of this is, if you look at these two filters, they're made by Indians. These are not filters that are made by Americans or Europeans. These are made by Indians, and they are largely influenced by the European standard, or the colonial standard of beauty. But you see a large set of mangled Indian faces online which are greatly distorted by filters, and it has become a huge colonial problem. These are my final findings, and one of the things that bothers me is the use of standardized uniqueness. Instagram provides a curated aesthetic, but this does not take into consideration the individual cultural nuances of any country. And since this is a global force, it is not governed by any particular country or any particular cultural system. So this creates a global unanimous culture, which is good, for it provides for the sharing of larger ideals like the woke movement, dignity of labor, and things like that. But at the same time, it strips off individuality within people, especially people who have been oppressed for generations. Another important finding that could be understood is the tension between agency, and it is becoming more and more clear that we are being influenced by algorithms, the usage patterns, the screen times of people, the aspect of social currency. In fact, I've seen certain companies hire people based on the number of followers that they're able to garner on Instagram, even though the job does not essentially demand that sort of a social media presence. These sort of algorithmic cropping into real life scenarios is becoming larger and larger. We've come to a point where we are looking at the emergence of a hyper-real posthuman femininity, where women across the world are being fed by different global ideologies to get into a standard of beauty. And it is widely known that social media causes depression, but one of the ways in which this sort of depression is caused is by promoting a Western ideal of beauty without consciously understanding that they're doing it. We can look at how this can extend to the introduction of AI, because I've seen a lot of people quitting to post their own pictures on Instagram, getting to a point where their entire timelines completed with pictures of them in Ghibli style or them in cartoon style. The use of AI to further mar the presence of a human, the identity of a human, is increasing, so that could be studied. And how it changes the perception of a person from one person to the other can also be studied. It also tries to show a light on digital subjectivity, and an identity is expressed in a virtual setting, whether it is being excessively sarcastic, or for example, the language that is used in day-to-day conversations is largely being influenced by Instagram trends, wherein certain phrases, certain lines, certain uses of sarcasm have seeped into normal human discourse. So that is pretty much the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Usha, for your wonderful presentation and for sticking to time as well. We're doing great, no worries at all. Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you, the three of you, for your papers, and also I think that they are really well connected. Even if you think about Instagram or social media from different perspectives, we can see that there's, we've got many things in common to talk about. Even if we're talking about performance from a drag perspective, or to perform femininity through social media, and how AI can change that for the audience. And with the trad wife as well, could be in itself a performance just to engage with these strategies for social media and gaining more attention, and the neoliberal point of view of social media and just earning money from those interactions. I think Anthony has a question and her hands raised. Thank
Hi.
you.
Thank you so much for all of your presentations. I've really enjoyed them. I have questions for all of you, and I would have also had one for Fadime, but I see unfortunately she's not here anymore. So I'm just going to direct my questions, if that's fine, back to back in chronological order by speaker. Usha, I found your selfie so entertaining. I gotta try that too. I'm afraid though it might get me depressed as well. So in the last panel, we also, Paula, who I see is here, and I also chatted a bit about how, like, if you tell AI, show me an indigenous woman, it's gonna show you a Pocahontas type princess, like so stereotypical. So I'm wondering, do you think AI models are going to be the solution to some of how technocratic beauty standards are depressing, or do you think these AI models are just going to make it worse because they can even go skinnier than size 00? So I'm looking forward to what all of you will say, and thanks again for your great presentations.
What I understood from your question is AI models a social solution to whatever is currently happening. And in order to answer that, I have three separate things. So the first thing is the current state of AI and what it's trying to showcase. And I want to tell it from the Indian context, not because it's only specific to India, but I think India works as a stand-in for the rest of the world. I don't want to use the term third world countries, but essentially it is a stand-in for the rest of the world. AI largely pulls out of content that is available on the internet. And if you look at the Indian diaspora that's available on the internet, almost more than half of it is the Indian diaspora that is currently living in first world countries. The Indian diaspora in America is a large population. And they have their own identity crisis, trying to fit in with switching codes, trying to fit in with the Western world. At the same time, we have to understand that even though India has the best 5G network connection in the world, the largest number of 5G users in the world, only 30 to 35% of the country is connected to the internet. So there is a large population within India who have not been exposed to the colonial discourse that is happening. So I think, as is the solution for a large number of things, I think the democratization of internet will play a very important role in how it shapes the available content online. And within time, I think the rest of the world will come to a consensus of understanding their identities. And I'm positive that we'll come full circle where AI will have a better understanding of what it means to come from a particular culture. And I think more emphasis is also being made on this area because India currently is pushing, of course, there's a nationalist agenda behind it, and perhaps it borderlines on propaganda. But still, India is pushing Indian knowledge system as a series of research proposals that are aiming to study the indigenous culture without largely being affected by the Western lens. I'd say the democratization of the internet could be the solution more than the AI models. It would be a resultant side effect. And thanks for the question.
Thank you, Natalie, for the question, for each question for each of the participants. And thank you, of course, for the three participants for their answers and the discussion. Anyone else on the audience who would have any questions, remarks, or even the speakers? Yeah, Marisa, you've got your hand up. Thank you.
Yeah, this question's for Usha, and I found it really fascinating that you use yourself as like the example to demonstrate this. And I feel like with any like researcher, an intentional researcher, there's always like pieces of yourself that is in the type of research, whether it's interviews, writings, or the actual performance that is in there. And I was just like wondering, what was it like the type of like what type of embodiment was it like for you to use yourself as a case study example to show this, of using the different filters and like having to see yourself and putting yourself on the slides, because I think that in of itself can create really fascinating evidence and results. So just having to use yourself as an example is really interesting. So yeah, I would love to know if that impacted you in any way.
I mean, the initial idea was to show some examples of how grossly westernized some of the looks of Indians are. And when I'm trying to put together such a study, I realize that for the sake of a study, I'm publicizing people who might not be essentially aware of what is being done. And that is the reason I took it upon myself to use the filters. And since the thing with consent is I am the researcher and I can give my consent easily, that was the intention behind it. But once I started studying the different types of changes to my face, I've dialed it down a lot. I've looked up filters on Instagram and Snapchat that are way more, I'd not like to use such a word, but way more campy in nature. When I got to that point, I was not comfortable with sharing such images. I've dialed it down a bit, but what I understood is my perception of myself is also largely influenced by the pictures that I take. I am a click happy person, so I take a lot of pictures. And how I understand myself or my image of myself is largely influenced by the outcome of the picture. So imagine I take a selfie in the morning and it turns out really good, somehow my day is better. While if I take a selfie and it turns out to be bad, it negatively impacts my day. So I think that reinforces the central idea of what I'm trying to say is that the representation of people and the identity, the visual aspect of identity plays a very large role because we are visual first beings, and your beauty or your perception of beauty or how you look and how you're perceived by others plays a very important role in how you are treated as a person. And within India it becomes a much more complicated issue because there are overlapping levels of the perception of beauty. The perception, I think, largely relies on visual, and that's why I think even though it might look a bit weird to talk about my facial features, I think it unlocks a very important aspect, that visual representation or the way people look. I think even your study centered on the visual representation of a trad wife. So I think visual plays a very important role. That's what I've realized when I use my pictures. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for your answer, and of course for the question, Marisa, as well. If there's anyone else who would like to come in, or if not, I myself have not really questions, but just comments or notes that I've taken for each of you. I also enjoyed, and I think this is common to the three of your papers, how digital platforms are extending the reach, and it's unavoidable if we can get somewhere. We went to get somewhere, so it's unavoidable that we use digital platforms to extend our reach. And at the same time, that is mediated by algorithms, and we are supposed to be the ones in control of the algorithm. But that's just not real. That's a lie that we get told in terms of if you like this post, you'll get more posts like that one. But for example, like it depends on the social media platform. If we turn to Twitter, I'm gonna still call it Twitter. Right now, it's completely a different thing. Like it's not what I like anymore, and it doesn't matter if I keep checking on those three dots and say I don't like this. It's still gonna be telling me whatever the hell they want to tell me, and so it's just up to me to just be on my way out of that app and just follow another one. I'm gonna move on to Usha, because I think when you were mentioning the control of the female body from an online perspective, I couldn't stop thinking about biopower and biopolitics, how that's being translated into the online sphere. So we still try to control what femininity means, how we perceive it, how we represent it, and femininity and masculinity as well. I'm talking about, and also non-binarism as well. So again, it's all a market in terms of reaching an audience and being productive. And I also wanted to mention that I think it's really important to take into account the mental health question. When, for example, I know for a fact that some new smartphones already have AI when you take a picture, and you cannot even turn it off. So the picture that you're taking is automatically edited according to whatever's algorithm. So the picture is not your picture anymore. It's the picture that you've taken, but it's modified by AI. So it could be a selfie, it could be anything. So the mental health question needs to be there. Like, we are not perceiving the image of ourselves, it's something else. So again, this post-human stance seems absolutely perfect to the type of study that are undertaking here. Again, it's not a question for anyone. It's just comments. And if you want to extend on any of the ideas that I've just thrown at you, feel free to do so. And again, it's a wonderful panel, and the three of you have so much in common, even if it's through aesthetics, algorithms, or Instagram. So if you want to have the floor, I'll give it to you. We still have a couple of minutes before the plenary session.
I think we are exceeding time, so I'll make my additions really short. So you mentioned about biopower and the fact that phones automatically change how we look. And I failed to mention that within the paper, but economic factors play a very important role. Take, for example, a large part of mobile phones within India that are bought for a very inexpensive price are the ones that largely do these sort of things, because they're largely taken from China and they have inbuilt applications angle the faces of the people who take pictures in it. And it is not just that, even social media platforms within countries like India, they have economic strata. So for example, people who are economically advantaged usually use Snapchat and Instagram, while there are local Indian apps that are catered to people that are in the local languages like ShareChat. And these applications have filters that are even more campy and even more obnoxious. And I think economic disparity is also playing a very important role, because the less economically advantaged you are, the more you're privy to these sort of cultural influences, whether it is not just social media, but the usage of products also. So that's what I have to add about it.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone, of course, our wonderful panelists and everyone in the audience. And I think that's going to be a wrap up for us today. Again, thanks so much for wonderful papers and discussion. We'll see you again in the keynote session in 10 minutes. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.